Elden Ring could quickly be summarized as open world Dark Souls, but doing so would really diminish all the fantastic nuances of this game. There's a lot of things here that you would expect and a lot that you wouldn't. It's easier than past From Software games in some ways, but much harder in others. One thing that you can't say is that Elden Ring is a bad or poorly made game because it's far from it. So in this spoiler-free review, I'll tell you hopefully everything you need to know before deciding to pick this game up or not. Much like past From Software games, Elden Ring is much more lore-heavy than a direct story. You'll need to dig into notes, item descriptions, and scour every corner of the world to find everything to really take it all in. For the general setup, there's a powerful item called the Elden Ring that was shattered. The offspring of Queen Marika the Eternal all possess the shattered remains of the Elden Ring called the Great Runes. Now it's your task to collect them all and become the Elden Lord. While Elden Ring lacks in direct storytelling, it shines with interesting environmental storytelling and cool small side stories. You'll be exploring massive, barren battlefields, and you'll be wondering what kind of great battles were here, what happened, and why did they get left abandoned. You'll stumble upon random characters that have really fascinating stories to tell that tie into the overall story that you'll want to follow up on. That said, you'll constantly want to get to the next story beat to get every morsel of the story because it's so interesting. Just don't expect a straightforward story here because, well, there isn't one. Past From Software titles were more linear, although interconnected, than more open world like it is here in Elden Ring. Now you can truly venture in whatever direction you want and fight all the different bosses in whatever order you want. You won't be gated off if you want to go to a certain area, but you will get your butt kicked, which is the game's way of telling you probably shouldn't be here yet. Now, if you do get lost, the game throws you a bone with something called the Light of Grace that guides you in certain directions. These can be found at Points of Grace, Elden Ring's versions of bonfires where you can save, level up, and adjust other factors of your character. Now, when you open up your map, it shows you these different waypoints and it points you in very specific directions towards the next main boss. There is a clear suggested path through the game, but again, nothing is stopping you from exploring or going off the beaten path. At one point, I went to this fort that I saw on the map, and it's huge with a cool boss waiting for me at the end, but it really had nothing to do with the main quest line, and there are tons of these scattered throughout the world. The map will slowly reveal itself as you explore the world, or you can find maps that reveal certain sections so you can see the map in its entirety. Now, this is not like an Ubisoft game or anything where there's markers and icons all over the place, it's just a map there to guide you. You can place beacons or mark points of interest that will show up in-game, but other than that, you're kind of just left to your own devices, and I actually like that a lot. It felt more organic exploring the world, and I didn't feel like I was being led around by my nose to go to certain areas. I could just kind of explore it as I wanted to. And because the world is designed so well, your eye will just naturally be drawn to certain locations, whether it be certain towers, villages, an interesting cave, or something that just doesn't look right. Now, once you get to these bigger locations like caves or dungeons, they all have great level design. These aren't just series of hallways, but they're really unique and totally different than other games you probably play. You'll be crawling through holes, jumping from rooftops, and much more to get through the game in the way it's intended to. It just feels so fresh, and I loved exploring new areas to see how I would get through it and what other secrets and new cool areas would be waiting for me. Now, if you're a Dark Souls or Bloodborne veteran, there is shortcuts in this game where you can unlock doors or kick down ladders, so if you die, you can go back much more easily. Now, most of the main bosses lie in wait in bigger castles or other dungeons, and they're absolutely huge. They will take you hours to explore with tons of little nooks and crannies, things to find in rooms that you don't even have to go to. And that's the thing that really amazes me about From Software games is they put so much detail into these areas that a lot of people will probably never see. And also what I love about their games is that your curiosity is always rewarded. If you see something that you can go to or you want to go down a different path, there's always something waiting for you at the end. Or maybe just an enemy waiting to stab you. Now, when you're not doing the main story dungeons or going to these bigger castles, scattered throughout the world are smaller catacombs with treasures and mini bosses waiting inside. They're much shorter and the bosses in them are much easier, but it's always worth taking the time to finish them. Now, when you're not in a dungeon or a castle or something like that, there are just cool things to discover in the world. There was this guy I accidentally ran over that was disguised as a tree and it set up this big quest line. There was a mini boss that only showed up at a very specific spot at night. And there's even a portal I found in a bush that I'm not going to tell you where it is or where it takes you to, but there are tons of cool stuff like that waiting for you to discover. Now, helping you traverse this massive world is your trusty Steed Torrent. This makes exploring the world so much faster and so much more enjoyable. You can travel large distances so much faster, you can jump up things. There's all these wind currents as well that you can jump up to bigger areas, and you can even jump down them and land softly if you're trying to get down somewhere. Now, you could walk around this world on foot, which I would encourage you to do, but again, if you're trying to get huge distances, it's really nice to have a mount that you can ride. Now, you can't ride the horse everywhere. Whenever you go to certain dungeons or smaller catacombs, it will automatically kick you off your horse and you just won't have access to it there. But what I do love is that your horse gives you an added edge in combat. Sometimes there'll be huge groups of enemies and you can kind of cheese them by just running circles around them or just taking swipes as you run by. There's even mounted combat. You'll be coming across other enemies that are also on horses, so there's a really unique dynamic here that has not been in past From Software games. Now, all that said, let me be clear. Elden Ring is still a very hard game. You're not going to be able to breeze your way through this game or cheese everything with a horse. You're going to actually have to learn it and get into the deep mechanics to really figure out how to master it. Now, the combat itself is very similar to Dark Souls. You'll choose a starting class, which there are 10 of, and basically each class just determines your starting stats and equipment. Don't worry if you don't like how your starting class plays or feels, you can always reallocate your stats later on in the game. And much like Dark Souls, you'll gain experience by defeating enemies here in the game called runes. Now, if you die, you'll drop all your runes and you'll have to go pick them up after you resurrect. But if you die again before you pick them up, then they're gone forever. So you'll have to be really careful and bank them at points of grace or just not die. Now, once you do level up, you'll be given points that you can put into different stats like strength, faith, dexterity, and tons of others. These stats are really geared towards specific builds, so you don't want to spread yourself too thin. You really want to focus into whatever your class is really good at. So for example, if you kind of want to play a sword and shield character, strength and vigor are always good for dealing more damage and taking more hits. But if you're a caster, something more like faith might be the way you want to go. But what's cool is all builds are viable here. Yes, even you magic users. But with this combat, you have to be patient. You can't run in and hack and slash everything. You're gonna die so fast. Even on the really easy kind of minor enemies, they can gang up on you and kill you super quickly. You really have to study enemy patterns and figure out what they're doing. And once you do study enemy patterns and you figure out the flow and then finally beat a boss, man, is it satisfying. Now, all that said, the game can be made easier in some ways. You can summon in NPCs that you find throughout the world to help you with the bigger bosses. You can call on friends for co-op play, or you can use spirits, which are new to Elden Ring. These spirits are basically like summoning an NPC, but they cost faith points to bring them into battle. And you can find all kinds of different ones. For me, I really loved this pack of wolves, and also this poisonous jellyfish. Sounds weird, but it can take a ton of damage, and it was actually really useful. These ended up being vital for me for certain boss fights that I just couldn't beat. And what's cool, they can be leveled up as well, just like any of your gear. So if you're noticing that they're starting to get killed really easily, you can always level them up. And when you put this all together, there's just nothing quite as satisfying as beating a boss that has just been kicking your butt for dozens of attempts. I definitely threw my controller a time or two and yelled out a few profanities that I won't repeat here once I finally beat certain bosses that were just pissing me off. And the bosses themselves are great. There's a good selection of different mechanics from past bosses that you would expect, like knights with big shields or dragons, but then there's some really unique ones that I did not expect, and they were really clever that I won't spoil here, and I want you to experience them for yourself. And because you have a mount, expect a lot of mounted enemies and bosses. These present their own unique challenge because do you want to fight them mounted? Some you can't even fight mounted because they're so deep in dungeons that you don't have access to your mount, so you'll just have to figure out how to fight them. Now, all this praise aside, Elden Ring does leave a lot of things unexplained that are really annoying. For example, I know that based on past Dark Souls games, you would be able to two-hand weapons that normally you only use one hand for, but it never explains how to do that. There's also this block follow-up move for anybody that uses a melee weapon that is super useful for breaking an enemy's defense, but again, it never really explains this anywhere. I had to watch a tutorial video just to learn all this stuff, and in fact, I would highly recommend you watch VatiVidya's Beginner's Guide to Elden Ring. You'll learn a ton of stuff that the game just doesn't teach you. Also, one of the things that really annoyed me more than anything was how I would constantly jump off my horse. Now, the button that is mapped to jump off your horse is L3 or clicking in the left stick, and the really annoying thing is you can't remap that. I went and checked and there's not even an option to. And what would happen is I'd be riding my mount in a hectic fight, and naturally I would just click in my stick because I'm just gripping my controller so hard, and I'd jump off my horse when I didn't want to. I really wish there was a way to remap this, or there was some context sensitive version where you wouldn't jump off your horse, but this annoyed me maybe more than anything in the game. And this is just a little bit of a nitpick more than anything else, but I really wish Elden Ring played more like Bloodborne. I wish it was faster, I wish you could regain health after getting damaged, and that gun for parrying was so nice. Also, Bloodborne just has way less enemies with shields, and those are really annoying here in Elden Ring. Of all the Soulsborne games, Bloodborne is my absolute favorite. I've beat it the most times, and man, what I wouldn't do for a sequel or an open world Bloodborne. Now, in the looks department, Elden Ring is a pretty nice looking game. If you've played any past From Software games, it looks a lot like that, just crisper and with more details. And I really feel like those details are what makes the biggest difference. Whether it's the intricacies of a character's armor, or just the different growth and different details on buildings and walls and all these different things, it's really the details that make this world feel alive. Now, as far as performance goes, it ran anywhere between 45 to 60 frames per second for me on PlayStation 5. Now, I know a lot of people were complaining about this, but I'm so used to everything running at 30 frames per second, so anything running far above that is kind of a dream come true for me. So to me, this ran like a dream, and I really didn't have any problems with it. But you know, if you play a lot of games on PC, or if you're used to high frame rates, then this might bother you a little bit. One of the huge benefits of playing this on PlayStation 5 was the fast load times. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times in past Dark Souls or Bloodborne games, you know, I would be frustrated because I'd have to die at the boss and then run all the way back and just sit and wait for that loading screen to finish. But here it's like done in seconds, and the respawn points are really close to where the boss fights take place, so you don't have to run very far and you don't have to sit through long load times, so dying is way less frustrating. Now, I don't know how it performs on the older gen systems. I imagine it probably does not load as fast, but if you're playing on PC, PS5, or Xbox Series X, man, are those load times nice. Now, there is some pop-in, but again, it's so quick and it doesn't really distract in any big ways, and it's not egregious anywhere. As far as the music goes, it's fairly standard for a From Software game. It's very moody in certain places and epic when it needs to be. It really sets the mood well overall, and if you've liked the soundtracks in From Software games before, then you'll probably like this one. And the same goes for the voice acting. There's not a ton of it as usual, but it's that typical, like, kind of British, creepy yet compelling performance. I really enjoyed listening to them. I just wish there was more of it.
The fallen leaves tell a story.
Overall, Elden Ring is a fantastic game with impeccable world design and tight, flexible combat. It's still hard and frustrating, but the game gives you the tools to overcome any challenge you would come across. Now, I'm sitting here working on this review, and all I want to do is just explore every corner of this amazing world, and what bigger compliment could you give a game other than, I just want to play this more? Now, if you want to know about other JRPGs releasing in 2022, some coming really soon, make sure you check out this video right here. There's a list of 32 JRPGs set to release this year. It doesn't include some of the more recent announcements like Soul Hackers 2, but there's still tons in there that I'm sure you've never heard of. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.